chapter 7. It's going to be a lot of biochemistry, but don't worry, I'm not going to go too in depth in the exam, okay? So just try to get the general concept of energy metabolism. All right, so energy comes in different forms. You get a heat, mechanical, electrical, and chemical. In order to produce energy, plants, for example, use photosynthesis, so they use sunlight. And we use metabolism. Metabolism, you get a release of energy, water, and carbon dioxide. So energy metabolism, is actually how the body obtains and uses energy from food. We just saw how the macronutrients were broken down. So now we're going to see how that breaking down of the macronutrients, our body then uses it for energy. So when it comes to cells, obviously the liver cells are going to be the most versatile and metabolically active. And then you have two types of chemical reactions. You have anabolism and catabolism. Anabolism is building body compounds, and because you're building something, it requires energy. Catabolism is breaking down of body compounds, and when you break things down, you release energy. So this is just a typical cell. What I need you to look at here, let me just grab my pen. What I need you to look at here is, this is your nucleus right here in the center. This is your endoplasmic reticulum, and then those little dots on there, those are your ribosomes that we talked about last time. Okay, those are where proteins are made. This is the one that this organelle here is called the mitochondria, and that is the one that we're gonna talk about. This is where our energy is created, okay? So you know the mitochondria is known as the powerhouse of the cells because of that, because they produce energy. All right, so just to give you the difference between anabolic and catabolic reactions. If you go to the anabolic is when, for example, the body is making glycogen. And what does it need to do? It needs to link these two glucose together. In order to build glycogen, it uses energy. Same thing, when the body builds the triglycerides, remember it breaks it down and then builds them back together, it requires energy. And when our body is making proteins and you're linking together the amino acids, it needs energy. Catabolic reactions are actually the opposite. Glycogen is broken down to glucose, which is then further broken down, and this actually releases energy. Same thing with triglycerides. They're broken down to their glycerol and then fatty acids. And then glycerol is further broken down, yielding energy. Same thing with fatty acids. And then you have proteins. They're broken down to amino acids, and then amino acids are further broken down, and they also yield energy. All right, so transfer of energy in reactions is through ATP. Your energy molecule is ATP. So this is released during the breakdown of glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids. It provides the energy for all cell activities and also all life activities. So you get these coupled reactions. So what this means is you get a breakdown of ATP through hydrolysis, and it occurs at the same time reactions that use energy occur. Why? Because you want it to happen at the same time. So the one that releases energy, like the reaction that releases energy, is happening at the same time as the reaction that's going to use that energy. Okay? The body uses ATP to transfer energy released from the catabolic reactions to power the anabolic ones. So ATP is adenosine triphosphate. This is what it looks like. And let me just grab my pen again. All right, and then you notice these little red squiggly lines in between the oxygen and the phosphate right here. Those are your energy bonds. When you break these, this is when you produce a bunch of energy. So this is what is going to be broken down of ATP in order to release the energy. So this is just an example of the capture and release of energy by ATP. Here you have ATP. It gets broken down, so it releases one phosphate. Remember that bond right there is a high energy bond. So that releases energy. But then you need ATP again. So what happens? Your body gets ADP plus that P that's floating around and makes it again. So it's a cycle. You'll notice everything is a cycle. All right, enzymes are the facilitators of metabolic reactions. They don't change in the process. But then you have your coenzymes. A lot of times these are your organic molecules, specifically B vitamins. B vitamins are very important in your energy metabolism. What coenzymes do is that they associate with enzymes to facilitate activity. Now the kicker here is if you do not have that coenzyme, then the enzyme cannot function. So this is why if you're deficient in certain B vitamins, you may feel tired. It's not because the vitamins are giving you energy, it's because they're a coenzyme in the production of energy, and that enzyme needs them. All right, so digestion. So you start breaking down nutrients for energy, and that is through digestion. So we know that from carbs you get your glucose and other monosaccharides. From your fats or triglycerides you get glycerol and fatty acids, and from your proteins you get your amino acids. So the molecules of glucose, glycerol, amino acids, and fatty acids continue to get broken down. So through catabolism, the bonds between the carbon, the hydrogen, the oxygen, and the nitrogen are broken. They start to break, and this produces energy. All right, all macronutrients end in the same place, okay? So here you're going to have to learn two names. You have your pyruvate. It's a 3-carbon structure. It can be used to make glucose, and you could get it from amino acids and glycerol. Then you have acetyl-CoA. This is a 2-carbon structure. It cannot be used to make glucose, and you could get it from amino acids. Then you have your energy cycle, your TCA cycle. Other names for it is citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle. So metabolic reactions that break down acetyl-CoA to carbon dioxide and hydrogen atoms. This happens all in your TCA cycle. Then after that, you get your electron transport chain. This is the final energy metabolism pathway. Transports electrons from hydrogen to oxygen. It captures energy released in the bonds of ATP, and it produces ATP and water. So we're going to go into detail in all of this. All right, like I said, all your macronutrients end up in exactly the same area, like they all end the same pathway. So this is what I need you guys to know here, okay? So I need you to see how proteins are broken into amino acids, and amino acids enter the energy pathways 3 ways. They could be converted directly to pyruvate, they could be converted to acetyl-CoA, or they can go straight into the TCA cycle. When it comes to carbs, carbohydrates are broken down to glucose. Glucose is further oxidated to pyruvate, then pyruvate to acetyl-CoA, and then into the TCA cycle. Fats are broken down, or your triglycerides, into glycerol and fatty acids. Your glycerol gets converted to pyruvate, and your fatty acids go and get converted to acetyl-CoA, and they all end up in the TCA cycle. So pretty much they all get broken down, go into the TCA cycle, and then they go to the electron transport chain. Okay? So that's the order that you need to know. All right, so what is glycolysis? This is when glucose is converted to pyruvate, okay? 1 glucose produces 2 pyruvate molecules. So it does use 2 ATP, but then it yields 4, so you have a net gain of 2 ATP. Any hydrogen atoms that are left over are carried to the electron transport chain by the coenzyme from B3 vitamin, or another word for it is niacin. Now, pyruvate can be converted back to glucose. It's similar to the reversal of glycolysis. And this happens in your liver cells and sometimes in your kidneys. Not too much, mostly liver. So here, what you need to take from this, I know this looks crazy. All I need you to take from this is, let me just grab my pen. Here, look at glucose. Ugh, that color is horrible. Sorry, let me pick another pen color. Perfect. All right, so what I need you to look at is right here, is glucose, okay? It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbon molecule. You use ATP in order to break it down into individual 3 carbon molecules, and it continues going over and over and over until 1 glucose produces 2 pyruvate molecules, each having 3 carbons, okay? All right, so pyruvate's options. You get quick energy. For quick energy needs, it goes anaerobic. Anaerobic means no oxygen. So this is when pyruvate gets converted to lactate. Okay, like I said, no oxygen, and this type of energy lasts a couple of minutes at most. So this is when you're needing quick energy, like you're running away from something, okay? For your slower energy needs, which is most of your energy needs, it is aerobic, meaning that it requires oxygen, and this is the one that we just talked about, is pyruvate being converted to acetyl-CoA, and then acetyl-CoA goes into the TCA cycle, and then the remnants go into the electron transport chain. Now, so sometimes pyruvate does get converted to lactate, okay? So how does this happen? Well, pyruvate accepts hydrogens. This happens when there's not enough mitochondria and or not enough oxygen. So it converts pyruvate to lactate, and this produces ATP quickly. Now, this wouldn't happen in people that do endurance training. Why? You start getting more mitochondria in your muscle cells when you start training, okay? So more muscles equals more mitochondria and also more oxygen, okay? Now, the Cori cycle is when this lactate that is produced is actually transported to the liver to be converted to glucose and then is sent back to the muscle. Like I said, the body doesn't like to waste anything. So here's pretty much a picture of what happens. You have glycolysis in the muscles. Here's your glucose. Glycolysis is glucose being broken down into pyruvate and yields energy. So then pyruvate gets converted into lactate. But then lactate travels back to the liver. The liver uses energy to convert it into glucose and then sends it back to the muscle to use it for glycolysis in the regular aerobic steps, meaning that's going to go from glucose to pyruvate to acetyl-CoA. Now, this is the main pathway, pyruvate to acetyl-CoA. Pyruvate enters the mitochondria of the cell. A carbon is removed and it becomes carbon dioxide. So this 2-carbon compound actually joins with CoA, becoming acetyl-CoA. Once this happens, it's irreversible. Now, the acetyl-CoA pathway yields more energy than glycolysis. So this is a little bit of what happens. Here's your pyruvate, okay? Now, pyruvate picks up a molecule of CoA, and what happens? A carbon is kicked out, so the CoA can link up to the remaining 2 carbons. So when it links up to those 2 carbons, it becomes acetyl-CoA, and then it goes to the TCA cycle. So the pathways of pyruvate and acetyl-CoA, sometimes it's reversible, so this is what these arrows mean. So glucose to pyruvate is reversible, amino acids to pyruvate is reversible, glycerol is reversible to pyruvate, lactate to pyruvate is reversible, and fatty acids to acetyl-CoA is reversible. The only 2 that are not reversible is once pyruvate becomes acetyl-CoA, it cannot be reversed, and once amino acids go and get converted to acetyl-CoA, it cannot be reversed. All right, so glucose enters the energy pathway. Like I said, what happens? Look up here. Let me get my pen again. All right, so glucose. Glucose is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbon molecule. So what happened? It starts to get broken down into 2 molecules of pyruvate. So here you have 1 molecule, here you have another molecule, and they're 3 carbons each, okay? Along the lines, you're always going to have hydrogens and oxygens being expelled. So these guys are taken to the electron transport chain, okay? So as it continues, you're going to get 2 acetyl-CoA. Why? Because you have 2 pyruvate molecules. And then those 2 CoAs are going to attach to your 2 pyruvate molecules once those carbons are taken out, okay? So you're left with a 2-carbon molecule that attaches to the CoA, and it produces 2 acetyl-CoAs. Those 2 acetyl-CoAs then go into the TCA cycle. And just like before, any leftover hydrogens or electrons are taken to the electron transport chain, okay? All right, so now we talk about glycerol to pyruvate. Glycerol can be converted to glucose or pyruvate. This is from your triglycerides being broken down. So fatty acids to acetyl-CoA, this is through fatty acid oxidation. So they get broken down 2 carbon units at a time to join up with CoA, and this is what produces acetyl-CoA. The released hydrogens and electrons, like always, get carried to the electron transport chain by your coenzymes. So here is what happens, okay? Here, we're going to use a little bit of math. Here you're going to have a 16-carbon fatty chain, okay? Acetyl-CoA comes in, and what happens? It attaches here. You see it right over here? So it attaches to that carbon. And then it gets taken out. The hydrogen and the electrons get taken out. And then you have another CoA that comes in and attacks it. So what happens? You start breaking off 2 carbons at a time, okay? And every time you break off is because a CoA attaches. So you get one acetyl-CoA. Okay, so once you get that one acetyl-CoA, which is down here, you're going to be left with a 14-carbon fatty acid, right? Because 16, which is the original, minus 2, remember this always takes 2, is 14. So then it continues doing it. So then you're going to get the next one, and so on and so forth until you're left with nothing. And then you're going to get 8 acetyl-CoA. So if I ask you, how many acetyl-CoAs can you get from a 16-carbon fatty acid chain? Your answer is going to be 8. How many acetyl-CoAs can you get from a 14-carbon fatty acid? Your answer is going to be 7. Okay? All right, so here's a little bit more. Let me get my pen. All right. So like I said, here is your fatty acid right here. Here comes your CoA, and it continues attacking over and over and over until you get all these acetyl-CoAs, and they go into the TCA cycle. Don't forget about your glycerol. Okay, glycerol also becomes it. So like I said, a 16-carbon fatty acid yields 8 acetyl-CoA. One glucose only yields 2. So this is why fat has so many calories in it, because it has a lot of energy. It produces a lot of energy. Okay. All right. So moving on to amino acids, you have to deaminate the amino acids before they enter the metabolic pathways. In other words, you have to remove the amino group. Now, the amino acid pathways, remember, they could go in through 3 areas. They can be converted to pyruvate, to acetyl-CoA, or some amino acids actually enter as compounds other than acetyl-CoA directly into the TCA cycle. So here's a picture of it. All right, so first is amino acids. This right here shows you deamination. See how the arrow is removing ammonia, and then it becomes pyruvate. Remember, this is reversible, so all you have to do is add the ammonia back, and then you get your amino acid. So that's the one that you go amino acids to pyruvate. The second one is amino acids getting converted to acetyl-CoA, but this is not reversible. But just like every other amino acid, it has to be deaminated. And then you get some that enter the TCA cycle directly. So this one is reversible. But still, you still have, in order for it to enter the TCA cycle, you have to deaminate it. If you want it reversed, you just add the amino group back. All right, so here's a review of energy yielding nutrient endpoints. So does it yield energy? Of course, they're all going to yield energy. Okay, so this is a nice little review of what we just talked about, and you could go over it. All right, so final steps of energy metabolism. You get your TCA cycle. This happens in the inner compartment of your mitochondria. It's a circular pathway, and it goes one way. So acetyl-CoA goes one way. Now, you need oxaloacetate, which is made primarily from pyruvate. So it's needed in the first step. And because it's needed in the first step, it's going to be synthesized in the last step. Remember that this is a circular path. Carbon dioxide is released from the TCA cycle, and just like anything else, your hydrogen atoms and their electrons are going to be carried to the electron transport chain by your coenzymes, which are your B vitamins. So let's take a closer look at your mitochondria. Okay, now every compartment or every area has something different. The outer membrane up here, this is the site of fatty acid oxidation, which is the outer membrane, this one right here. Okay. The cytosol is the site of glycolysis. This is just the liquid part of it. Okay. The inner compartment, which is this part right here, the green, is the site of pyruvate to acetyl-CoA, also fatty acid oxidation, and your TCA cycle. So your TCA cycle occurs in the inner compartment. Your inner membrane, which is this purple right in here, is the site of the electron transport chain. Okay? All right, so this is your TCA cycle. No, you don't need to know this. But what I need you to notice here, number one, is that it is a circular cycle. Up here you have your acetyl-CoA, okay? But what did I say that the first step needs? Your oxaloacetate, and it's made from pyruvate. So what does that happen? It's produced in the last step in order to kickstart the first step all over. So it is a clockwise type of cycle, okay? And this is where a lot of your energy is produced. And like always, your hydrogens and electrons are going to be taken to the electron transport chain by your B vitamins. So this is the electron transport chain that happens in the mitochondria, and it actually occurs in the inner membrane. And it captures energy in ATP. So here's what you need to see, okay? Your coenzymes go ahead and bring your hydrogen and electrons, okay? And up here you have these electron carrier chains. So as the electron hops through these one after the other, it charges them, it actually powers them to grab this hydrogen and spit it out here against the concentration gradient. Because it's going against the concentration gradient, it's going to require the energy, and this is why the electron is there. So once this starts getting saturated up here, all these hydrogens, what happens? You have this hydrogen ion downflow from the area of high concentration to the area of low concentration, which is here. Okay? And this is where you produce the ATP in the electron transport chain, because it's going to get that ADP, the phosphate, and produce ATP. There's a lot more details to this, but we're not going to get too detailed. All right, so kilocalorie per gram secret. Like I said, fat provides the most amount of energy per gram. Okay, and this is because of the carbon-hydrogen bonds. The more ATP equals more calories. So one glucose yields about 30 to 32 ATP. And when I mean one glucose is when glucose goes through glycolysis, then it goes to the TCA cycle, and then it goes to the electron transport chain. So the entire thing from start to finish, one glucose yields 30 to 32 ATP, while one 16-carbon fatty acid yields 129 ATP. So this is why fat gives you so many calories, because it produces more ATP. So this is everything we talked about. Okay, this is a summary of everything. And this is the one that I need you to focus on. Like I said, right up here, this is glycolysis. So glucose gets converted to pyruvate. Then it goes into the TCA cycle, and all the hydrogens and electrons go to the electron transport chain. Same thing, fatty acid oxidation, TCA cycle, anything left over, electron transport chain. And then you get your amino acids that they could enter three ways. They could be converted to pyruvate, they be converted to acetyl-CoA, or they can go straight into the TCA cycle. Okay? That's pretty much all you need to know. All right, so feasting, excess energy. Metabolism favors fat formation. That's just how we are genetically. Regardless of excess from protein, fat, or carbs, your fat cells will get large. Now, excess proteins, what happens is amino acids are deaminated and carbon is used to make fatty acids. With excess carbohydrate, it starts to displace fat in fuel mix, and it starts sparing your dietary and body fat from being used. So this is why you don't lose weight when you overconsume carbs. And then excess fat is the most direct and efficient conversion. Why? Because you're going from fat to fat. Everything else, you have to go from protein to fat and carbs to fat in order to store it. All right, so the transition from feasting to fasting. Glucose, glycerol, and fatty acids are used and then stored. Fasting state draws on these stores. So your glycogen and fat are released to provide energy. Now this is where basal metabolism comes in. Basal metabolism is the cell's work that maintains all life processes. In other words, right now you're just sitting here, not eating, not drinking, just listening to my lecture. The fact that you're alive uses 2/3 of your total energy. So all of your life processes. So this is a breakdown down of feasting and fasting. So here in the first one, which is feasting, right up here, you see how anything when it's overconsumed, is going to be broken down and it's going to be stored. It could be stored as glycogen, and it's all going to be stored as body fat. So what's going to be stored as glycogen is going to be your carbohydrates. Everything else can be stored as fat, all three macronutrients, okay? Now when you fast, what happens? You start using your glycogen stores to produce glucose in order to produce energy. And also you start using your body fat stores to produce, to break down into fatty acids, your triglycerides, and to use energy. Now, what happens when you go beyond glycogen depletion? This is when you have no more glycogen left and you're not eating glucose. So this is starvation, okay? Like I said before, your body starts to eat its own proteins. And it's actually going to use those body proteins to produce amino acids. It loses the nitrogen, and then it produces glucose to give energy to the most important parts of our body to stay alive. So energy for the brain and nervous system, okay? And then whatever's left of your body fat is going to be broken down to fatty acids and be used for energy for all other cells. So this is where your ketone bodies come into play. They're the ones that are being formed when you're starving, okay? Now, fasting, inadequate energy. Carbs, fat, and proteins are all eventually used for energy. They begin with the release of glucose and fatty acids to produce acetyl-CoA. Once liver glycogen is depleted, you're going to get a drop in blood glucose level. And this is starvation. Starvation is when cells degrade their components for fuel, meaning they start eating themselves to produce fuel. So, adaptation. Making glucose. Your nervous system and red blood cells, they need glucose. So your body starts to break down body proteins to produce glucose. Another adaptation is creating an alternative fuel. This is your ketone bodies. This is when you use fat to fuel the brain. So you break down fat into ketone bodies. This also slows the rate of body protein breakdown, but it could lead into ketosis, and actually ketosis induces a loss of appetite. Why? Well, your body already figured it out that even though you're hungry and it's telling you, hey, we need food, you're not getting it. So obviously there's no food. So you get a loss of appetite. All right, conserving energy through fasting. Adaptation, conserving energy. Hormones of fasting start to slow down metabolism. They reduce energy output. They conserve fat and lean tissue. So it supports weight loss, but not fat loss. This is the problem with fasting. Yes, you can lose weight, but you're also, not only are you losing fat loss, but you're also losing lean tissue. So symptoms of starvation, physical symptoms, slowed heart rate, slowed respiration, lower body temperature, organ failure, and lowered immunity. Psychological symptoms can be depression and anxiety. And this is why I'm not a big fan of low-carb diets. The metabolism can be similar to fasting. It uses glycogen stores first because you're not giving it enough glucose. So gluconeogenesis happens when glycogen is depleted. And then the body tissues are still going to be used somewhat even when protein is provided in the diet. So if you're providing protein in the diet, like extra protein to spare your body proteins, it doesn't work that way. Some of that tissue is still going to be used. All right, so here are some adverse effects of low carbohydrates or ketogenic diets that you can look through. All right, so that is it